You start to find that society starts, it's like you woke up in an alien world. For example, if I am on a bus, and I'm seated in a chair on a bus, and an elderly lady gets on the bus, I will stand up, and I will ask the elderly lady to sit in my chair. If I'm on an airplane, and someone else is struggling to put their carry-on bag in the overhead, I will stand up and say, "Las mia, please," and I will help them put the carry-on in there. And everyone around me looks at me like I'm Mother Teresa. Oh, that's amazing. I can't believe you did that. Really? I don't know. Some people have said, "Oh, Uncle Kage is pretentious. He just does that because he is a pretentious old American guy." I don't think so. When I was young, we used to call it manners, and it counted for something. Apparently it doesn't anymore. Or maybe it does. If a single one of you in the next few months is sitting on the tram, and an elderly lady gets onto the tram and you stand up and give her your seat, I will consider my purpose fulfilled. Hey, what time are we supposed to stop? I know what time we were supposed to start, but what time are we supposed to stop? This is called Uncle Kage's Story Hour, with Fox and Moore's assistance, but I don't think we had the full hour. I'll throw some stuff on the end, how about? Is that okay? Yay. All right. I got some older stories I can tell, and I think I will, just for the hell of it. Because I realized that I've been doing this story hour for longer than some of you sons of bitches have been alive. So some of you were not even on this planet when I first told some of my stories. Am I bitter? Yes! Don't get old, it sucks. American comic George Bush once was... Oh, did I say George Bush? I'm sorry, I meant George Burns. How could I make that mistake? Saw what I did there, didn't you? American comic George Burns once was asked when he was my age or older, "What is sex like at your age, Mr. Burns?" And he said, "It's like playing pool with a rope." Some of them got it. So you don't ever want to get old, believe me. But sometimes with the passage of time, there can come rewards. We're going to take them back in time, strangely enough, to the 1980s. There we go. Pretty sure it was 1981, if I remember correctly. My old friend Neil, who has since passed away. That'll happen too when you get old. My friend Neil and I, we were young teenagers. We used to go every single Friday with our meager earnings from our summer jobs. We would go to, first, what we called the cultural literature store. Today you call it a comic book store, but we didn't want our parents to know where we were going. So we would go to the cultural literature store and we'd buy some cultural literature in 4 colors. And then we would go a couple of doors down to a bookstore called Gene's Books, run by a gentleman named Gene. Gene's Books was a staple in the area, and boy, we must have been doing that 4 or 5 years without fail. Every Friday, we would get our cultural literature, And then we would go to Jean's books and we would buy the larger literature, science fiction stories. The stories of Isaac Asimov, of Larry Niven, who's a jackass, but that's another story. We've been doing this for years. And one day, one of the checkout cashiers came up to me and she said, "You'd better be careful." I said, "Why, are there spiders in here?" She said, "No, Jean doesn't trust you." I said, but we come in here every single Friday. We almost always buy books from him." She said, "He thinks you're stealing from him." I said, "Well, that's ridiculous. We're his most loyal customers. Every single Friday we come in and we buy some of his books." She said, "But you come in with bags from another store." Okay, this is not making sense. I'm sorry, I appreciate your concern, but this is just ridiculous. We go to the cultural literature store first, and then we come here. Thank you for your concern, but I think it's not warranted. About 10 minutes later, here came Jean. This tall, gangly, ugly guy with 4 noses. He came up. I made that part up, actually, about being ugly. So, he came up, he said, "Excuse me, can I look inside that bag you're carrying?" My bag from the cultural literature store. And I said, "Why would you like to look inside my bag, sir?" He said, "I would just like to see what's inside." And I said, "Really? I see a lady over here who also has a bag. Are you going to look in her bag as well?" And he said, "No, just yours." I said, "Is that so? Very well. Please look inside." He looked inside, he fished through the cultural literatures, and there he handed it back to me, and I said, "Are you satisfied?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Thank you very much. Neil, drop what you got, we're leaving." And we walked out, and we never again walked into that store. Because if you're going to treat your best loyal customers that way, you do not deserve their custom. In my book, which is written in American English, that makes you a motherfucker, okay? 23 years later, I got a long memory. 23 years later, I was back in my old hometown. And I was at the same shopping center, and I was with a new friend that I had met in school years ago, and she was visiting the area, and I was showing her the area. And we happened to look up, and it was still there. The cultural literature store was long gone, but it was still there. There was the sign, Jean's Books. And I said to my companion, "Say, let me tell you a story about Jean's Books." Now, where the cultural literature store used to be, there was a Starbucks, of course. And there was a gentleman sitting at the Starbucks, and he was sipping coffee and reading a newspaper. When I said that, he looked at me and said, "Oh yes, Jean's Books, that's the finest bookstore on the East Coast of the United States." And I said, "Oh, I beg to differ, sir." And he said, "Oh?" And I said, "Yes, let me tell you a story." Now, I don't know what it is about me, but when I start to tell stories, crowds start to form. So I started telling the story of what happened between my friend Neil, the loyal customer, the late friend Neil, and this horrible, dreadful man, Gene. And the crowd got bigger, and I got up on a chair, and I started telling this crowd of 100 people what a horrible, hideous, monstrous fellow this was. We would never take our custom to his store again! And that's what the crowd did. And I jumped off the chair and I quickly grabbed my companion and said, "We have to go now, let's go, let's go, let's go, we have to leave, we have to leave." And she said, "Why are you in such a hurry?" And I said, "The guy with the coffee, That was cheating! There's a saying in furry fandom that you don't fuck with Uncle Kage. That felt good. That felt almost masturbatory good. I liked doing that. I don't know if he's still in business, and you know what? I don't care. Probably shouldn't keep these people too much longer, because I'm sure there's something that's going to be going on in this room at some point, and we want to give them time to set up, so it starts on time. But I do want to end with a small observance. Some of you perhaps did not hear the news. And if that's the case, then I'm very sorry to tell you. There is, for the first time at Eurofurence in 10 years, an empty seat in the audience. My dear father, Grandpa Kage, that many of you met, passed away, I'm sad to say. He died on the 25th of January this year. Very suddenly, it was a terrible shock to the family. And I think a lot about him. He was a man from a different time, from a different generation, but he was nonetheless a furry. And this was driven home in such a powerful way when my dear and sainted mother was packing to come to Eurofurence, and she was getting things out she wanted to bring. And she opened one of the drawers of my late father's dresser, and all of his Eurofurence badges and all of his lanyards were neatly laid in that drawer. He had kept them all these years. And she started to cry, and I had to go and comfort her. I could tell lots of stories about my father. They're sometimes hard for me. My father was a working man. He was a man that worked his entire life, and it was difficult for him when age caught up and he could no longer work. It didn't stop him, though. One of the reasons that my mother and father moved to the state of North Carolina, which is a very temperate state, from Pennsylvania, which is a very cold state, was there was a terrible snowfall, and my father, who was not well, he required oxygen to breathe, he was not very strong, looked outside at the snow, and dragging his oxygen tank, went over and started to put on his hat and coat. And my mother said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm going to go shovel the snow." And my mother said, "No, you are not. In your condition, you're not going to do that. Absolutely, I forbid it. You will not. Get that hat off. Sit back down." So my father angrily sat back down in his chair and he sulked. And he waited until my mother went upstairs to take her shower. She came downstairs from taking her shower and saw my father outside with his oxygen tank in one hand, the snow shovel in the other hand, shoveling the snow. That's when they decided they had to move to a warmer climate. But that's the kind of man my father was. As I said, he was a working man. After he died, there were some duties that a son has to perform. I've always maintained that, a son does have these responsibilities to his father. One of them is a legal responsibility that the deceased person has to be formally identified. Somebody has to go and say, "Yes, this was my father." I couldn't place that responsibility on my mother and my sisters. That's something a son has to do. So I went to the funeral home and I introduced myself. And they very quietly took me to a little room off to the side. And they opened the doors and there was a coffin there. And I saw my father lying in the coffin, very still, motionless. He did look very much like he was asleep. And I took a deep breath, and I walked up to the coffin, and I braced myself. And I looked down at him, and I said, Selfie! No, I didn't. Of course I didn't. That's a lie. But it made you laugh, didn't it? And that's okay. My father was at his happiest when the people around him were happy. He liked to hear other people laugh, and he did his best through his life to make that happen. And of the very many gifts that my father granted to me, that's the one that I cherish the most. And I thank you for allowing me to share it with you tonight. As my glass is empty, and oh. My time on the stage is done, and I once again thank you. In a very short time, there is going to be an improvisational workshop that is going to be given by a very, very old friend of mine, the artist formerly known as Prismo. He has asked me to join him. And I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't. But I was sober when I said that, and I'm not sober now, so I'm going to go join him with that. So if you want to go to the improv panel, I recommend it. And after that, if you want to go to the charity booth in the lobby, just go. You'll see. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen.